Welcome to the Glitter Boom Girls podcast. My name is Robbie McPherson. I'm over on the East Coast.
And I'm Amy Asberg. I'm on the West Coast.
So we're getting right into it today because we have a very special episode of the Glitter Boom Girls podcast. We have a guest star. Like, I know. I can't believe it. You guys know him. Like, everyone knows him. He's totally world famous now. Like, he was in the Daily Mail, for God's sake. Like, that's it. You have arrived. He was featured on Wendy Williams. She mentioned him. I mean, I can't even believe he's like on our show. So his podcast is Behind the Velvet Rope. And yes, you guessed it. It's David Yontef. Yay! Welcome, David.
Hello. Thank you for welcoming. What an introduction.
I need like a marching band. I need like dancing girls. Like, we are so thrilled that you're here.
I'm thrilled to be here. I'm having my coffee, waking up, and life is good, right?
Yes. Amen. Amen to that. So I know I have a million questions that I want to ask you. Amy has a million questions that we just want to pick your brain on everything. Okay.
You can ask me anything. I really am an open book. I tell people that all the time.
Okay. So first question, where did you get that unbelievably fabulous chunky sweater?
You are not even going to believe this. The answer is I got it. So before the world closed down, besides being a podcast host for reality TV and Bravo and all of that, which we can get into, I really lived. Like, I am not one of those people on my deathbed who is going to look back and be like, here's my list of what I wish I did. It's just, I don't really believe in people like that anyway. It's just, if anyone's like that, call me because I can snap you out of it. But I lived, and I've been to 55 countries, and I've been to all 7 continents, and I used to have a life, and I was in Morocco, and one night, I mean, this is crazy, like, that you ask about the sweater, because it actually has a story. We slept in the Sahara Desert as one of our nights in Morocco. And, you know, it's like Morocco. It's like, it was August, July. It's warm, people. Guess what? They tell you when you're already in Morocco, when you're about to do your overnight in the Sahara Desert, that it's freezing. And you're like, but it's July. They're like, it does not matter. It will be freezing tonight. So in preparation, on a street vendor, I bought this. And let me tell you, it was freezing in the Sahara Desert all night. And this sweater is literally like the thickest sweater I've ever had in my life, and now it's freezing in New York, and so that's why I have it on. And it's freezing in my apartment. I live in a nice building. I'm high up. It's just so cold here that the heat literally is at the point of not working, basically. So there you go.
I love that story.
I thought I was going to give you some like, oh, I got it down the street at like Saks.
No, I need to know if you have taken off that sweater and thrown it in the parking lot to fight with Jax. Like his chunky sweater. Remember, he removed it and threw it? Chunky sweater.
This is a Jack sweater. It is.
Yeah, I love it. And I was today years old when I learned that the Sahara Desert is cold at night in July.
Oh my God.
Who knew?
So cold. And like, I don't even know if cold is the right word. I don't understand it either. But it's an experience, right, that you can talk about.
Yeah. So obviously there's a lot to unpack here. So let's start with your hugely successful, fantastic, fabulous podcast. So how did you go from Morocco and buying the sweater from a street vendor to now you're like talking to Vicki Gunvalson and all these big stars on a podcast?
Well, okay, I have reinvented myself 800 times over. Remember, like you said, and I want to pick your brain in another lifetime because you mentioned you wrote a book. I've written a book too. Don't even ask where it is. It's like getting a book published is a nightmare, but that's a whole nother story. But right, so we can talk. I have had a million careers. I went to college. I then went to law school. I then practiced corporate tax law. Yeah, like you guys are making a face. I always say this, like I am a closet smart person. I am smart and I have life skills and life success, but I really, really just want to talk about Vicki Gunvalson and Vanderpump Rules and reality TV.
Right.
I don't want to talk about anything having to do with the real world. I don't want to talk about anything smart, anything intelligent. Move along. I just don't want.
It's boring. It's boring.
It's boring, and there's enough of that. And I will leave it. You know what it is? How can I say this? You can't. Listen, I applaud everyone that is out there on the soapbox making change. I just feel like some things are just bigger than each of us, and let's, have your beliefs and everything, but I just don't want to talk about it 24 hours a day. I just want to talk about stupid crap.
Yeah, well,
I'm tired.
It's also kind of, sometimes you just can't do anything about it. And
Right.
yeah, bravo to the people who are out there, fighting for causes and all that. And maybe we all have our own little causes that, but for some of us, myself included, I'm a pretend smart person. So not a closet smart person, but I'm like a pretend smart person. But I'm the same way. I can sit down and I can have a talk with you about all kinds of stuff. But like Amy and I decided on this podcast, we do not do any, current events. We don't do politics. We don't do any of that because this is an escape. This is where you go, right? And I think your podcast is kind of like that, even though your conversations might get to something, right? But
they do. So my podcast, right. So I mean, so I was a corporate lawyer, and then it's a long story. I quit that. And I fell into recruiting and HR, and then I had like a staffing agency, and then I sold that, and then I went in-house, and I ran like HR and recruiting departments at a lot of big companies, like most notably Martha Stewart. I worked for Martha Stewart.
Oh, wow.
Some consider that a claim to fame. I consider it just like, hey, I survived, and here I go. Having said that, I have nothing. It's funny because I am in the media with all my interviews I do. So one publication, we don't need to mention which one it is, they found out that I worked for Martha Stewart, and they run my interviews all the time when all this drama comes out, and they were like, well, we want to talk to you about this experience of working at Martha Stewart. I was like, listen, we can talk, but it's like off the record, right? Yeah. We talked after like an hour. The next minute they called me and they're like, that was the most amazing thing in the world. We have to run that. And I'm like, listen, I'm an open book, but I'm like, first of all, you're not running that. And it's until you really wrong me, I don't really need to speak out against you. That's not my personality. And really, Martha, look, you don't get to the top of any field without being really good at what you do. And when you're good, you just don't have tolerance for nonsense. So no, working for Martha Stewart wasn't easy, but like I only come after you and speak out if you've really wronged me. And like she didn't really wrong me. So it wasn't a pleasant experience, but she's really good at what she does. But I did work for Martha Stewart. And then I worked at all these companies. They kept merging. And then like when my last company merged, I was like, I need a break. And I was always into reality TV, always, right from the beginning. The Simple Life, The Hills, Laguna Beach, all like old classics. So and this is what my book is about. I was like, okay, it helps that I live in New York City. I'm like, I'm just going to become friends with these people we see on TV. I mean, they're not Beyonce. This isn't like, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. These are real people. And we're in a certain age of social media that if you really want to put yourself in harm's way and pleasantries way, you can put yourself in the way of these people. So that's what I started to do. And I started to become friends with all these people. And then I realized when I was hanging out with some of these reality stars, no one's looking. There's no filming. And let me tell you, everything I see is just as interesting as what is on the damn TV. So I'm like, I'm going to start a podcast. Yeah. So I the more I was in this like inner circle, so to speak, I was like, what the hell am I going to do with this? Like, how is this a business? Because I ain't doing nothing with my life except drinking martinis and, passing out drunk every night. So.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
There is so nothing wrong with that. So then I just was like, well, I'll start a podcast and maybe people are interested in these stories. And my pilot episode premiere was about me in Florida, and I was at this dinner with like Dolores Catania from New Jersey, Kelly Dodd from the OC, and Ramona Singer from New York. And yes,
oh
Rick
my
Levinson.
God,
right?
That is a trifecta right there.
Right. So it literally was like, no, listen, if there's anything really confidential, no, I'm not going to repeat it. But there was enough fodder. This dinner was just what you think it is. Ramona is sitting down. She has her 10 courses in front of her before anyone else even opened the menu. Of course, I basically pretended like Dolores wasn't even there. I had to sit next to Ramona just because I'm a glutton for a punishment. Right. So it's like, I was like, maybe someone's interested in this story. Released the pilot episode. People were like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, this is for real. I'm like, this is a real story. So my podcast, it really started as like a 2-day a week. I'm going to tell you my stories, but it quickly morphed into 3, 4. Now we are 5 days a week. There are no stories. Stories are now on Patreon. And now it is literally just a 5-day a week interview show with like Vicky Gunvalson, Lala, whoever you can think of from reality TV and pop culture. It's not just reality TV. It's like we had Perez Hilton on, Melissa Rivers. So it's really just 5 days a week of me interviewing, and I'm coming for you. I'm coming for you. You know, like people who describe my interview style, which I think is pretty accurate. Like here's how I describe it. I will ask you out on the date. I will pick you up. I will hold the door for you. I will take you out to a nice restaurant. You can have drinks, appetizers, dinner, dessert. I will pay for everything. I will hold the door as I drive you home, and I will treat you like a perfect gentleman. But at the end of the night, Daddy wants them, and Daddy's. And so I think that's my interview style. We start slow and we're talking and just, you know, and if there's things to ask, I will ask. But, you know, it takes like we lead up to that. We start with the easy ones. Mm-hmm. And then I'm just like, okay, here are 13 things that we need to address right now before you go anywhere. And then it's like rapid fire. And then that but, you know, listen, I mean, people don't have to answer something if they don't want to. And I don't know. It's such a strange, then like you said, I am on Wendy Williams and in all the press. And then, you know, people have different reactions, these famous celebrities when they're all over the press, which I will stand behind every time. Like, you know how this works. Like, don't say something. I mean, I don't know. It's almost insulting when they're like, why is this over 17,000 magazines in 17,000 countries? It's like, did you think just because I'm like relaxing you that you were on like some podcast nobody was listening to? Like, I don't know. Like, I will always stand behind like, you said this, not me. So you need to go to therapy and deal with your own issues. This has nothing to do with me.
Right. You know, that's something I notice about your interview style too, is like you said, you just come right out. Okay, these are 13 things that we need to talk, you know, because I think a lot of celebrities and even reality stars who are used to putting their lives out there, they're still used to being interviewed in a controlled environment, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm not talking about this. You can't ask about that. And there's publicists all in the way and everything. But all of your podcasts are, they're raw. That's how I would describe it. It's just this raw conversation. And, you know, if someone said, well, should I, like, let's pretend that I knew Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. And they were like, should we go on his podcast? You know, my advice to any celebrity would be, well, yeah, just be authentic and know that whatever you really are is going to come across. Because that's kind of, to me, that's the mark of a really good interviewer. You really bring it out of these people.
Thank you. You know, and like, look, some people are more media trained than others. It's, you know, so I'm never let down. You know, certain people, it's kind of like your name alone gets you in the door. And I don't tell them this, but we have happy interviews where there's no headlines and no drama. It's like, it's such a good mix. And I think being 5 days a week, we can do that, you know?
That's a lot of work. I mean, we know how much work our little podcast is, and we do it once a week. So do you do all your own editing and your own posting and everything, or do you have help?
I have help. I would say I do almost everything myself except editing. And I don't really edit. I edit a lot because anytime you chat with me for an hour and a half or over, it's a 2-part episode. I have a lot of 2-part episodes. People are always like, ugh, 2 parts. It's like, well, bitch, you listen to both of them. So, I mean, nobody wants to listen to an hour and a half. So it's like anytime it's an hour and a half or more, I break it into 2 episodes. And it's just like reading the room. It's like, I can read the room of when, like, I would like you for 7 hours, but I'm getting a good sense of like this hour that we booked is truly an hour. And that's okay. We keep it an hour. And then other people get on, and after like 40 minutes, you just like breathe a sigh of relief of like, okay, this is going to be a two-parter. It just is what it is. So it's like I kind of make the decision on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
And then other people, I just realize like, oh shit, we're 35 minutes into this. I got to cut, 30 things and just get to the meat because like this person really wants to go. So it's kind of like but other than that, I mean, I do, that old saying, I mean, this, and I'm not meaning to sound like an ego, whatever, if you want something done, just do it yourself. Yeah. I would love to find an amazing team. I have people that are involved, but it's so hard to find. I mean, this is going to sound obnoxious, but it's so hard to find good help. That's not meant to sound obnoxious. I work like a dog. It's just each thing that I have someone helping me with, I'm just like, you can do this a little better, can't you?
So how much of that though? Like,
but I don't edit myself. No, that I just can't do it.
It's time consuming, but I want to know how much of the not being able to find good help is you, just like not being satisfied and you
it's David's high standards is what it is.
It could be a little bit of a control thing,
A little bit, but like for instance, I'll give you an example because I mean, the people involved are not going to listen to this. I'm not that it's 80s.
Ah, wait a minute.
Well,
how do you know?
Like they're young and like they don't even know what the 80s is. But so I'm my own Instagram and I'm very aggressive on Instagram, like just, in terms of like promotion and answering people. So if I hand over, say, other aspects of social media to you, it's like, you got to be aggressive. Like you should be tweeting like everything. Like, so then that type of thing gets me mad. Like, wait. We were just mentioned on Wendy Williams. So why wasn't Wendy tweeted the 75 comments? Like it's not control at all. It's the opposite. Mm-hmm. It's that I don't want anything to do with Twitter. I don't really understand Twitter nor enjoy it. So it's like, I'm handing you this is part of your job, just be aggressive. And you're like, well, we were just mentioned on Wendy Williams. Now that's a big deal in the scheme of like all the things we have going on.
Oh, yeah.
So why haven't we retweeted that, tweeted at Wendy, tweeted at, Vicky, cause it was her story, tweeted at Lisa Rinna cause she was involved, we should have sent 800 tweets. Like that's just my style of social media.
Now, but I have to ask, are these like Sonia interns or are they like
these are paid? Listen, everyone is paid and
no excuse then.
No excuse.
So like I do most everything myself, and even the light editing, like if there's no editing, like intro outro, I can do that myself, but it's when like breaking it in half, I'm like, I don't even have time. And editing's hard, man. It's hard to get it right.
I will say, like in our shows, we don't edit out like content, like we don't change the content, but you know how it is where, especially me, because of the way I talk, I have these pauses where I go, it's, and that goes on for like 20 seconds. And so I'll just go in and like remove some of those, but it's very, very tedious and very time consuming. Definitely.
You are a better woman than me because I do not edit those out. And like certain people say, and I get it, like I'm self-aware, I say like all the time. So I get, reviews. We were just talking about reviews that are like, the following 75 shows, you said like, I'm like, okay, well, thank you for listening to 75 of my shows. You're obviously a fan, but I can't stop saying like, it just is what it is. And so I could edit those things out, but I don't have the energy, nor do I care. It just is what it is. And listen, I think people like that about my show. They love that, like you said, like it's raw, and it's like people say it's like having a conversation with a friend. The only time I really edit something out is if there's a big gap in tech. So like even if someone says like, wait a second, can you hear me? I won't even edit that out. Mm-hmm. Once I'm editing the show, sure, then it's fair game. But like I try not. So if someone said that, I wouldn't edit it out. But then I have people that are like, hello, and then yes, I'm dead silent for 4 minutes because you're somewhere, and then you come back and I'm like, well, welcome back. Your internet wasn't working, and then it's like, okay, once the show is going to edit and I'm paying someone, then I'm like, okay, then I'd like all the following things out. Right. But I really just don't want to edit. I feel like That's the point of my show, is just to have a natural conversation. So if your dog is barking and jumps up in your lap and you're like, I'm so sorry for my dog or my screaming kid, I'm like, bring it on.
Right.
I mean, that's not ideal, but people tend to, I think, like those things. They see like these famous people like in a different setting.
Yeah,
maybe.
it's honest.
It's authentic. Yeah,
right,
it's authentic.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, okay, I want to ask you one more question about your podcast, and then we can remind everybody where they can hear it. It's on Apple, right? Spotify. You can go. Do you have a website?
It is on Apple, Spotify, anywhere podcasts are found, Behind the Velvet Rope. And the easiest place to find me is on Instagram, but it's Behind Velvet Rope. There's no the. So Behind Velvet Rope on Instagram, or Behind the Velvet Rope. Yeah, and like we put clips on YouTube, but Instagram Behind Velvet Rope, I mean, that's me. So if you reach out, I tell people, anyone who's interested in reality TV or pop culture, this is the podcast for them, because A, nobody else is doing a 5-day-a-week reality TV pop culture show, and B, it truly is interviews every day. And it's it's a lot of Bravo and Housewives, but it's not all. Like, we've done The Hills, The Real World, Laguna Beach. We just had people from America's Next Top Model. I mean, we do The Bachelor. We have guests from every show. 80s, we've had Taylor Dayne on. So there you go. Like, we've had right. Like, we had Melissa Rivers, which, I mean, she's 80s, 90s, whatever. We branch out. The more we go on, the more we're branching out.
Yeah, and
we have a lot of girls from RuPaul's Drag Race.
That's where I was going, because Amy is a huge RuPaul's Drag Race fan. I mean, I am too, but Amy's like the nth degree.
Serving you eleganza, honey.
Yeah.
Eleganza.
So tell us a little bit about how that came about, because I have to say, people, if you guys have not listened to some of these interviews with these unbelievable, hilarious, talented drag queens, you gotta hear it. So tell us about that, David.
Well, so like when I started, it really was the Housewives and Bravo. And just, again, like having run businesses, I sold my business. There was some point in this thing, I have a business mind. It's just how I think. I'm kind of like Bethany Frankel in that sense. It's a business. So at some point in this experience, I said, wait a second. This 99.9% Bravo, which has brought us an audience, is just not a good business model for so many reasons. So many reasons. It's a small community. The network is involved sometimes, like you mentioned, publicists, and there is approval and people involved sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, it's just not, and like there's an infinite amount of people. So now that we have this core Bravo audience, A, I don't want all my eggs in one basket, and B, how are we going to grow? Like, we've grown immensely, but now if you're a Bravo person, 98% of you have heard about us, and that's when I was like, I gotta branch out, and there's so much else I enjoy in life. So that's why, RuPaul's Drag Race is just one of those shows. I'm like, okay, we're not going to go and interview, someone in any political party, because that's some sports figure, but I'm like, what's one step outside the box? And that's when I'm like, oh wait, Bachelor, The Hills, MTV, blah blah, and RuPaul's Drag Race is one of them. So we've interviewed and we have a bunch more coming up. We've interviewed like Bob the Drag Queen, Trinity the Tuck. We have a second part with Trinity the Tuck coming up this week. We've had on Ms. Cracker. We've gone old school with Peaches Christ and Lady Bunny. I
love those two. Those were great interviews.
Those are good. And so it's like, and we have, it's not out yet, we have Evie Oddly coming up. And we were supposed to have people from this season of Drag Race, but it's now pushed off, because of contracts and all that, of like, nobody can come on during the season, like, fine. We were supposed to interview Elliot with 2 T's. We'll probably do that when the season's over. So, you know what I have to say, like, the drag queens as a whole, like, you would think, oh, we have Sugar Cane coming up. You would think, so anyone on RuPaul's Drag Race is now fair game. You would think that they're the high maintenance ones. They're not. The drag girls are nice. There's not a lot of slinging mud. It's just they're happy episodes.
Yeah.
You know, they bring the drama, and a lot of them are in drag, which I don't require. I mean, I always tell people don't get glammed up for me. I mean, I might have a chunky sweater on, but well, that's very nice of you. So like Ms. Cracker was like in full drag, and I'm like, honey, it's like 1 p.m. on a Monday, and she's just like, listen, it helps me to dress and drag at home to feel, and I'm like,
her personality.
More power to you. But we've had people where I'll say like the audio is going out, but I'm using clips of this on YouTube, and I mean, listen, sometimes people say no, but we've interviewed drag queens as not in drag and put out clips, and they're fine with it.
Sure.
So they're all, I mean, I think like which drag queen was my favorite, if I had to pick, I would say probably just from an, listen, you can't put, just like that intangible. I think I loved Trinity and maybe Ms. Cracker second, just as far as, I mean, and that's another thing too. You should see the comments I get when I interview all these people from Bravo, and like people have really strong opinions. Because I know all these people in real life, I don't really get emotionally invested in the show. I love all the shows I watch, but I don't get like, I hate this person. It's like, to me, it's like, I can tell when we're having an emotional experience before, during, and after. So I judge each person based on like what happened after and before the interview.
Oh,
like
there's
people that come on that I'm like, I love this person. We had a great interview, but we also like kept in touch. You just bond with certain people.
Sure.
So I'm like, I understand that you hate this person on the TV, and I am not taking that away from you. I just love this person as a human being, and I don't really care what happens on the show because I know them. That's kind of how I judge everyone.
Well, there is, people have to understand this by now, even though it's reality TV. I mean, not all of it is out there, not all of it is real. There's still a measure of control and a measure of editing and things that go on, and you hear enough of stories like that where people know somebody in person and oh no, they're not like that at all. So I think that's something, because audiences are more savvy, so they really they know it's not all real. But
I agree.
So I would love to move into our neck of the woods now, because we have this person, you, who is such an 80s like lover. And Amy, I'm a child of the 70s, so Amy's really like the 80s, maven here. But
so what do you mean by a child of the 70s? Does that mean, because I've always misunderstood this just in general, do you mean you were born in the 70s or you were born in the 60s, grew up in the 70s?
Early 70s. So I grew up in the 70s. Yeah.
You grew up in the 70s.
Yeah.
Right.
So I was a little kid in the 70s.
Born in this. Right.
I was born in 73. So I feel, Robbie, I feel like I'm both, but I mean, from 6 to 16.
But the thing is, like, you don't remember the 70s as well because you were young. So you were born in the 70s. You're a child of the 80s. Yeah.
That's what Robbie says. I feel like I'm a little bit of a hybrid, but,
Well,
and
it's
let
also...
me just say...
Oh, go ahead.
Well, no, I didn't interrupt you, but I've said this 8 million times. Now, I'm not going to clone myself. Maybe one day I'll start a podcast network and I'll have lots of people working underneath me. But if I could reinvent myself, and I mean, I am in this reality world and thrilled to be in it, but if I could clone myself, I would have the same podcast with 80s on the side. I'm not going to do that because I'd be dead, because there's no more time in the day when I'm done doing 5 shows. But I am as equally interested and know about the 80s. And to be honest with you, if as far as booking guests, I would almost think, and this I don't know for sure, I would think that booking some of the 80s guests, I don't know, it could be harder, but it could be easier.
Yeah.
It could be one or the other.
Right.
So I would just have the same thing, and I'd be booking like Joyce DeWitt on a Monday, Priscilla Barnes on a Tuesday. Like, this would be my life if I wasn't doing my reality podcast. Really.
Like you said, you're a businessman. You are smart enough to divest. I mean, who knows? You get all those workers and, get a gaggle of Sonia interns or whatever it takes, and then, put it together. But you are welcome here. Yes, to talk about it.
I'm going to have to be back because I could talk about the 80s for.
I have a question for David.
Yeah.
I need to know this. This is how I know someone, seriously know someone. Young David is, let's say, 7-year-old, 8-year-old David.
Mm-hmm.
Getting up on Saturday morning, what cartoons are you watching? What are your go-tos?
Well, do you know what it is? This is where, so first of all, like, I'm one of those ladies who I lie about my age, like in the real world. I mean, you can go Google me.
Okay,
There's shit about me
fair.
on the internet night
That's
and
fair.
day. I am Googleable.
All
But
right,
no,
age.
but I'm gonna say
Let's just say young David.
I lie about myself with my age in the real life, but then when I talk about music and TV, that's when people are like, wait, I don't understand.
Yeah.
Well, and I have so many guests that will say something to me like, well, you don't know what this is. And I'm like, oh, sweetie, I know. So the answer to your question is I wasn't I really, hand to God, wasn't a cartoon person, but I can tell you, like, Friday nights was like Dukes of Hazzard, then Dallas, then Falcon Crest. And, it was, so I was there for like nighttime 80s TV.
So which Duke was your Duke?
Ooh, yeah, which Duke?
Was it Bo or Luke?
Probably Bo, but I'm not sure that would be the case now.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, probably Bo.
Okay. All right. And what
I have a story in real life about John Schneider.
I need to hear it right now.
Okay, it doesn't involve me. Let's not mention any names, but I have a story
except John Schneider.
Right, except John Schneider, that John Schneider was at an event I was supposed to be at with some of my housewife friends. And, they were all in the like, hey, everybody buy a ticket because these, people are celebrities. And apparently, I don't know I'm getting these details, like they might be mixed up a little bit. Like John Schneider's wife, I guess, either stepped on one of the housewives' feet or was in her way. And there was like hello, like you're in my space. And John Schneider was like, don't you ever fucking speak to my wife like that again. And, yeah. So there was a scuffle between John Schneider and his wife and housewives. Yeah.
No kidding. Yeah. Do you know, I actually have a John Schneider story too. That was my cat, everybody.
Oh wow.
Oh my God. You know what? Can we just like stop the presses for breaking news? The door on my porch just opened by itself.
Well, that's scary.
Right? Like this is some you in danger, girl. So yeah, so here's my John Schneider story. So he was a celebrity guest along with Joyce DeWitt and Mindy Cohn at the world's largest disco. I don't know. Do you know about the world's largest disco, David?
Well, perhaps that's where this story comes from.
Because
did he have his sideburn?
Wait a minute. Okay,
and I was supposed to be there, but I had to go to a Countess Luann cabaret.
Oh, you have to come next year. I will be there. We will have so much fun.
You don't understand. I have friends that so I was supposed to go and hang out with John Schneider and Mindy Cohn and all this because I know the housewives.
Well, that's
now everyone could Google and figure out which housewives it was and which all this, but whatever.
Well, you know what's weird though is I was there and I never saw anything like that. And he was really, really nice, really chill. I do know which housewives. I saw them. So I won't say, but he was just a really, really sweet guy. And the whole event is a fundraiser. So usually the celebrities that come are, they're of a good mind and, they just kind of understand it's all a big fundraiser. But oh my gosh, that is a crazy coincidence. I just feel like I
was supposed to be there. And so that's the thing. Like before COVID, I traveled the world. Really, like I went to like celebrity conventions, like if you could tell me like, okay, like the cast of Three's Company, like you're going to get a picture with like Priscilla Barnes and Jenny Lee Harrison and Joyce DeWitt all at once in like Indiana, like, those celebrity conventions. Yeah. I went to them. Like I would have to go through my Instagram and pull up all the pictures because I went to so many, but I used to go and I used to be like, okay, so yeah, I got Three's Company. And, oh, wait a second. You're telling me like, Cheryl Ladd and Jock Smith are going to be in, Wisconsin. Well, I'm getting on like this was my life. I traveled around to all of these 80s people.
And now you told me this the other day, but you went to this South Fork thing for Dallas, right? Because And I have to hear about this. So while you're telling the story,
amazing.
I'm going to get up and I'm going to shut the door because it's 20 degrees out. Okay, so how did you end up at this thing? What is it? When was it?
So I love Dallas. I feel it is one of the best shows that has ever existed in like the history of TV for so many reasons. It's like the storytelling was just so rich. So
Fist fights at the disco, ruined lives, audacity, power games, big hats, boardrooms,
big hair,
champagne, oil.
They
everything.
don't make TV like that anymore. And like, so listen, a lot of my other favorite shows are more 90s. Like I love Melrose Place, 90210. So like it gets, but Dallas is one of my favorite shows of all time. And like, first of all, what show now is coming on? Okay, Grey's Anatomy, SVU. We have some exceptions, but what show lasts for like,
78 through like 91.
90, 91. Yeah. So that's one thing. Just the storytelling was so rich. So I am a huge Dallas fan. So at that point, I had never met, so my threshold for travel is like, have I met you 12 times or never at all? So it was after Larry Hagman passed away, unfortunately, but it was 2018, I think. Yeah, it was the 40th anniversary. And it was at South Fork. So right there, I'm like, okay, I mean, I wouldn't just go, but they're like special guests, Linda Gray, Charlene Tilton, Steve Canale, and Patrick Duffy. And,
wow.
it spells it out. Like day one, you're going to wait in line. You're going to get a group picture with them. Day two, bring whatever you want signed, and you'll do one-on-one selfies. Wow. So I'm like, right then, I'm just like, and it's at South Fork. I never was at South Fork. So I'm like, this is like a no-brainer. I actually had a friend who was like, oh my God, we're going to go. So we purchased our tickets. And listen, it was a shit show in a sense that there were a lot of people. Oh my God, there were a lot of people.
Like how many? Like 1,000 or 500 or?
And they kind of, I think, oversold it.
Oh.
But if I had to take a guess, I would say like 1,000, maybe something like that.
Now, and wait a minute, so South Fork? That's the ranch they use for the exteriors of the intro, right? So where is that?
It is right outside Dallas. I forgot the town, but outside Dallas.
Okay.
So yeah, I went with a friend. We stayed in a hotel, and this was like a 3-day event, a 2-day event. So I'm trying to think if it was 2 or 3 days. The first day, I think like they welcomed you, and then right away it was like an assembly line. You waited in line. And when I say waited, it was a long line. And it was literally like you got up to the front and you got a picture right in between Charlene and Linda and Steve and Patrick. So that alone, I mean,
worth it.
Linda Gray is one of the best, like, forever. Like when I met her, I was like, you're like my favorite person ever. I mean, she maybe isn't my favorite person ever, but she's up there. And she was
she's
like,
still gorgeous too, right?
Sue Ellen, yeah.
Sue Ellen, like to me, best character on Dallas. I mean, people could argue, but that's my favorite. And yeah,
she was complicated. Sue Ellen was complicated, right?
Linda Gray is just.
Well, she was married to JR. She. I mean,
yeah,
she had to deal with that.
Character. Amy and I were talking about this in another podcast episode about like 80s bitches, right? But like Sue Ellen, she had this vulnerability, right? Like Linda Gray is such a great actress, and to me, she brought this kind of vulnerability and steeliness. Like she wasn't evil, but she could be evil,
But she did hook up with JR's rival.
Well, yeah, but look at all the crap JR did to her, right? It was all, it's payback. It's payback, bitch. Yeah, but I just loved how she made the character. She wasn't all good or all bad, right?
But that's the thing. You really felt for her, and what a character arc to go from. I did a Zoom thing with her recently. It was one of those, like, those celebrity conventions are now online. I have no interest in doing it online just because of what I do for a living. It's like, I don't need to pay and get a picture or screenshot with you online. But when it came to her, I paid for this because it's like you had like a one-on-one chat for like 15 minutes or something. And, you know, like she just said, like, look, like I went to them. I didn't want Sue Ellen to be a drunk anymore. But, you know, it's like, I wish that there were more people at this thing before. Like, why didn't they invite like Audrey Landers? Why didn't they invite like Morgan Brittany? There's like a lot of people that could have been there. But it was great. And then the next day you had like a barbecue at South Fork and you did one-on-ones, like you got something signed and you did one-on-one like pictures with that. Charlene Tilton's like, why do I know you? Because I mean, I've met her so many times. It was such a good show. Like I love Dallas. And
okay, I have Dallas questions for you.
Okay, and I didn't love Dynasty, Knots Landing, or Falcon Crest as much. Not even close. There was something about Dallas was my show.
What can you identify? Was it just some unknown thing, or was there a particular?
I think maybe just the timing. Like I started it at the right time. You know what I mean? Like no, I can't really.
Yeah.
I can't. Like by the time Dynasty came around, I was busy. I never really was watching TV as much. You know, I think just like timing had something to do with it.
Yeah, and Dallas was kind of the first. It was the first sort of family, you know, empire drama.
Well, it was a male soap. It was the first nighttime soap that was kind of for men.
And also,
that's true.
Take a minute, like besides the Victoria Principal, like we had Barbara Eden on there.
Mm-hmm.
We had the national icon treasure that is Susan Lucci was on there. That was like her first nighttime, like, I want to break out of Erica Kane and do something different with my life.
And Tina Louise. Don't forget Tina Louise.
Tina Louise and Christopher Atkins from Lulu members.
Oh
Sue Ellen
he was like the camp counselor for
Sue
John
Ellen
Ross
was
or
hooking
something.
up with him, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we had some really big people popping around.
And Morgan Fairchild for one ep. Wasn't Morgan Fairchild Jenna Wade for like one episode?
I think more than one episode. Oh, and Priscilla Presley.
Oh my gosh, of course.
I went to a Priscilla Presley book signing a few years ago in New Jersey. And I mean, I have to tell you, like it was a children's book, which I'm like, I don't have children, but I don't really care. I'm going to buy this damn book. And like 99.9% of the people were there dressed like Elvis. And when it was my turn, I was like, I'm sorry, sweetie, we need to talk about Jenna Wade. And she was she was, I think, just so, she was like, you don't want to talk about Elvis? I'm like, you know, I don't know what to say about Elvis. I have nothing to say. But we can talk about Jenna Wade all day, every day.
And was she excited and relieved that someone was not asking her about Elvis?
I was just like, Dallas was like the best thing. And mind you, Dallas 2.0 was brilliant. It was
really? I never saw it.
I didn't get to that.
Josh Henderson, Jesse Metcalf from Desperate Housewives. It was really good. It was really, and you know, it's a whole big thing where like the network heads at TNT came in and the ratings weren't great. Like they say that if the management didn't change, they would have got, because the way Dallas 2.0 ended was Christopher Ewing, Bobby and Pam's son, died. And that was it. There's no like story after that. So it's just like Linda Gray and they all, there was a whole online campaign of, and Jordana Brewster was in it from the Fast and the Furious.
Right.
So there was a whole online campaign of like, just let them wrap it up. And you know, network heads, they're like, yeah, we don't care. There's no ratings here. But the cast was really invested in there. Like, we just want, 8 more episodes just to wrap this up. It was good. Was it as good as the original? No, but it was good. And Larry Hagman was in it at the beginning. I mean, JR died.
Right.
Like JR died in the story 2.0 because that's what happened in real life. But they honored it. They did it so well. It was so good for the legacy of the show. It was a great show. It was not like the original, but for a reboot, it was great.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that the original was kind of a Romeo and Juliet. It started out like Bobby and, the Ewings and the Barnes.
Yeah.
And it was also kind of a Cain and Abel story, like JR and Bobby, the good and the bad. And I think that's kind of like how it started. And I love, it was said, Linda Gray said a long time ago that she was trying to figure out the women, rich Dallas women. And she went into this ladies' room at some place in Dallas and she looked and watched this lady open up her little purse. And she had in there a lipstick and a little Derringer, a little gun. And she was like, excuse me, is that a gun? And the girl's like, yes, this is Texas. And she put on her lipstick, and Linda Gray was like, okay. She kind of figured it out right then and
And
there.
Sue Ellen was born.
I love that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really neat. So for the storylines, because Amy, you bring up a great point. To me, this is what I loved about the show. Even though I'm going to pretend like it all aired before I was born, but
Okay.
I wasn't. So I would watch it on Friday nights, like you said, David, with my grandma. Because my parents,
Me too. I
right,
watched it with my grandma.
yeah, they would drop me off or whatever, and I'd be hanging out with her. And and the layers of the story, it was like something for everybody. So you had the power struggles with the brothers. Then you had Cliff Barnes, who was always like trying. He was like trying to and he could never quite get there, and so bitter and resentful. Then you had all the women. And even though the women were the wives, like they were the wags, right? They still gave so much 3D stuff for these women to do. And I would assume maybe you can tell us, David, if you've, talked to these women about their parts, but I would assume for actresses, excuse me, who weren't like 20 anymore, these were juicy, juicy parts.
Yeah, they were. And even parts like Donna and Ray, like Susan Howard, like even parts that didn't start juicy, like you were a B-list character, they developed over time,
Like Kristen, for example, Sue Ellen's younger sister.
And
Mary
look
Crosby.
what she went on to do.
Kristen was a good one.
Right.
So that's what I mean. Like they were good parts. The writing and the storytelling was so good. And then you had like Lucy and Mitch, like they were the younger ones. So it's like they really had something for everyone, like you said. Like, okay, they made mistakes. That's the other thing I think that was interesting. Now we have like Housewives where people get fired and even real shows. But back then, a lot of shows didn't have these major cast changes. Like look at Dukes of Hazzard or anything else. Like right. Dallas was one of the first. Barbara Bel Geddes left and they recast her.
Oh, so strange.
They recast her. It's like they had, Linda Gray left too and came back. They Patrick Ewing, Patrick Duffy left. They killed. So it's like they had people leave and come back, and it's like that was unheard of at the time. Or recast, and then like the whole world gets in an uproar, and then Barbara Bel Geddes. People were leaving for money. Like people were having contract disputes and being like, I'm leaving. Or like Patrick Duffy was just like, I want to try something different. So, that kept the show, I think, fresh, and that's now a trend, but that wasn't the trend back then. It was so ahead of its time in that sense.
Yeah, in 1986, suddenly you look up and there's Bobby in the shower.
Right.
Coming back from the dead. And,
right.
and it was all a dream.
The infamous
dream. Wait a second. What's happening?
So
right. So and like look, they kind of invented the cliffhanger.
Yes. The season, you're right. That whole season ending thing where everyone was like, "What? I have to wait all summer before this is resolved?" What? You're right, they did. David, have you ever considered writing the definitive like oral history of Dallas or something like that?
I have decided, I've thought of many things in my life. It's just, where would that time come from? Someone would have to like write it. They'd have to sit with me. Like, where is that time going to come from? But in theory, yeah, sure. That would be great.
Okay, I need to know from both of you.
Such a good show.
Why did JR have that haircut of every boy in my second grade class? He had that little plastered bangs over his forehead. I need to know what that was about. And I need to know why Pam changed her hairstyle into these little poof bangs and this little short. She had that long, pretty hair. What was up with these Pam hairstyles, you two?
Well, I would like to know. Look, Victoria Principal, they say she really kept to herself. Like during.
Oh, really?
During the takes, like action, it really was. Patrick, Linda, and Larry were like 3 lifelong best friends. Really, that never stopped. And they just, I don't think that none of them are going to speak bad about Victoria Principal, but she really just was always like, she just never, she always kept to herself.
Were these Andy Gibb years?
Some of them, yes.
Yeah, because from interviews that she's given, recently, many years after Andy passed away, she talks about how challenging all that was with the problems that Andy was going through. That's kind of interesting. And then, of course, when they broke up, people just vilified her. And I did see one interview with her once where she said that it was either talk about Andy Gibbs' problems with substance abuse and things like that, or just let everybody think that she was like this, man-eater, heartbreaker, whatever. And she said she actually chose to just stay silent, to not kind of sully up Andy's reputation and to make it easier for him, which I always thought was really interesting. I mean, Amy, that doesn't answer your question about the hair, but
that doesn't answer your question about the hair. No, I'm not sure.
Hair and makeup. I loved Morgan Brittany's big old poof, and then Audrey Lander. I loved their styling.
Yeah,
I love that.
The hair did get bigger as the seasons went on. The what is it? The higher the hair, the closer to God in Texas, right? But
Victoria Principal, she doesn't do. I mean, I think she also doesn't need the money. She doesn't do like the celebrity conventions with them. But then again, if you look at it, Suzanne Summers isn't about to do that. Mm-hmm. And Jacqueline Smith isn't about to do that. So I think that just has to do with money. Like Victoria Principal with her side businesses, I think is worth a good amount of money. Whereas the others, I think, I don't think they're starving to.
She had
skincare.
Oh, yeah, skincare or something, right? Yeah.
Some kind of beauty. Yes. I think she wrote some books.
Yeah.
I think she's, I mean, what do I know? But I think like Victoria Principal is like the Suzanne Summers of the Dallas crew. Like she doesn't need the money.
Interesting.
She's the
thigh master or the thigh mistress of Dallas.
And like I think also, she never bonded with them, so it's not like like when you have something at South Fork and it's like Patrick Duffy and Linda, like they're all friends with Charlene, so it's like we're getting paid to go,
right?
And with our friends, and you have to sit there and take pictures with like 1,200 people, but you're getting a check, so why not?
It's fun for them. Yeah, they get to see. They had a different experience, and she might think of kind of a bad time in her life. Who knows if that was.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. I mean, maybe it's actually kind of painful for her to deal with that. But just like all of us in our lives, like you described an awful lot of different careers, David, and Amy and I, like we met waiting tables, and each of us has had different jobs, and you work with people who have all kinds of different personalities, and it's exactly the same on a TV show set where not everybody gets along, not everybody likes everybody else, and some people just like to say their lines and go back to the trailer. Other people are like, hey, what's up? Or, so.
Let's go out after. Let's go to the corner bar.
I mean, that's what it is. Like, speaking to people 5 days a week on my show, that's like I have a whole different relationship to like quote unquote celebrity and everything. Like it's a job. So to me, like I just think when you're not realizing what it is, you just expect everyone to be, friends. And even like when you hear about tension on set, you're like, well, it's a bunch of creative people who are into their characters, who all, not even Dallas, just any show, who have an opinion on where their characters should go. Mm-hmm. And other people have an opinion on where their characters should go. And it's just like, it's inevitable kind of thing.
So
not for everyone, but you know what I mean.
We are out of time on our show. Like, I can't believe it. But I want to ask you, and I want to ask you, David, do you want to keep going for a little bit and do a second part? Do you have time?
We can keep going, yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
We can do 2 parts.
Wonderful. All right, so I'm going to sign off for this episode, and then we'll just pause and then start again. I am so excited because I have so much more to talk to you about. Like, we have to cover Xanadu, we have to cover music. Okay, so we're going to close out this show. I'm Robbie Ann McPherson, and go ahead, Aim. Talk about your book. Mention your 80s book.
I'm Amy Asbury. I did write a book called Once Upon the 80s. If you want to remember every single little detail and every single little thing in your room and every commercial that came on, etc.
Yeah.
If you're feeling very manic and you want to read all about it, pick it up, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, wherever books are sold. And thank you for listening.
And if anyone wants to listen to non-80s interviews with reality gurus, and hey,
So
at least check out our Taylor Dayne. I mean, was
Ooh.
Taylor my favorite guest ever? No.
Ooh.
Really?
Taylor wasn't.
Tell it
listen,
to my heart.
Ooh.
Taylor wasn't necessarily feeling me as much as others.
Which is
do.
interesting in and of itself. I might have to listen
I
for
am
that very
shocked.
reason.
I, for one,
Yeah.
am shocked. I would have not called that.
It's weird. Like
You
my
never know.
loyal listeners normally can tell and be like, well, is that person being rude to you? And I'm like, well, yeah, but most people can't. But check out, Behind the Velvet
Interesting.
Rope, anywhere podcasts are found. It is literally reality. If anyone listening to this watches reality TV, and it's not just Bravo, but it's a lot of housewives.
Everything. It's so
everything.
fun.
And
Yeah.
follow me on Instagram, Behind Velvet Rope.
Yeah, and we have to. I mean, I 100% vouch for even if you don't know anything about drag queens or you don't watch Real Housewives, just the interviews themselves. David is so great at getting people to just open up and say everything, and they're really
Compelling,
authentic.
very
Yeah,
compelling.
super truthful. There were a couple that I listened to where I didn't even know who these. I'm old. I was like, who is this? But I got to know them, and then I started Googling and looking, and that's a real talent you have, David.
That's what I like,
Agreement.
and like, I'm not trying to change people's opinions. Sometimes people will listen and be like, I hated that person on the show. Now I see them as a human. I'm like, wow, that's a huge compliment. Not even what I'm trying to do. So
Right.
if it confirms that you still hate the person, great. Someone like you who could say you didn't know the person and you Google them and you're like, wow, what a talent. That's amazing too. So like, I think there's something for everyone on the show.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And we're going to have links on our pages too. Our Glitter Bee Girls Twitter and the Glitter Bee Girls on Instagram. So you can easily find David. But he's like world renowned now, you guys. So,
Yep.
You're
anyway.
too kind.
It's a privilege.
It's the truth, man. All right.
privilege.
So we're going to close this out, and we are so thrilled we're going to have a part 2. All right. So thanks for listening, you guys. See ya.
Bye.